I was rinsing lipstick off a wineglass when the memory of that Christmas night came back to me. Not the food, not the gifts, but the sound of paper sliding across polished wood. If you had walked into my parents' house that December, you would have thought you'd stepped into a magazine spread. White lights perfectly spaced along the roofline. A 12-foot Christmas tree in the front window, every ornament coordinated. My mother doesn't decorate, she curates. Me, I rent a tiny one-bedroom apartment over a bakery and work as a freelance interior designer in Seattle. My furniture is mostly thrifted. My plates don't match. My parents call it bohemian, which is their polite way of saying embarrassing. The only part of our family that's actually impressive is my grandfather, Walter Reed. He's the kind of wealthy people whisper about: old investments, commercial buildings, land. No social media, no flashy car, just a faded pickup truck and a house that's been paid off since before I was born. He still wears the same brown wool coat I remember from childhood. When he talks, people lean in, not because he's loud, but because he doesn't repeat himself. My parents love telling people they came from nothing and built everything themselves. They leave out the part where Walter helped with their first house, Greg's first business, and buylaid them out during the recession. So when Walter invited us to his place for Christmas dinner that year, I knew exactly how it would go. I went because I missed him. They went because they smelled money. We drove out to his house just as the sun was disappearing behind the pines. Snow layered the fields on either side of the road, the sky that purplish color that only happens in winter. Mom checked her reflection in the visor mirror every 30 seconds. Dad rehearsed stories about his new clients, the ones he hoped sounded important enough. "Remember," Mom said, smoothing her hair, "no talking about your little freelance phase." "It's not a phase," I said. "It's my job." She gave me that thin smile. "Just don't make it sound like you're struggling. Your grandfather worries." Translation: don't make us look bad. Walter's house sat back from the road, warm light glowing from the windows, smoke curling from the chimney. He opened the door before we could knock, as if he'd been standing there waiting. "Claire," he said, his eyes crinkling, "you made it." He hugged me first. He always did. Inside, everything smelled like pine and roasted turkey. No caterers, no staff. Just Walter, an old record player humming Christmas jazz, and a table set with simple white plates and heavy silverware that looked older than my parents' marriage. Dinner started out like every forced family gathering does. Small talk about work, fake interest, laughter that ended a beat too late. "So, Dad," my father said, swirling his wine, "still hanging on to that old place downtown. I know some people who'd kill to get their hands on that building." Walter smiled. "I'm aware of its value, Greg." Mom leaned forward. "We just want you to enjoy life, that's all. You don't need to worry about paperwork and assets at your age. You know you can trust us to manage things." There it was, not even dessert yet. Walter didn't respond. He cut his turkey, took a bite, and changed the subject to the weather. It wasn't until after we'd finished eating, when the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured, that he did something different. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, which he'd draped over the back of his chair, and pulled out 3 plain white envelopes. He laid them down one by one on the table. One in front of my father, one in front of my mother, one in front of me. "For each of you," he said quietly. "A small thank you for coming and for the year behind us." The room shifted. It was like someone had turned down the music but turned up the tension. Mom's eyes flicked to the envelope, then to Dad. Her lips curved. "Oh, Walter," she laughed too brightly. "Are we doing your little Christmas games again? Is this another pretend check like that year with the Monopoly money?" Dad snorted. "Yeah, you got us good with that one. What is it this time, Dad? IOUs?" He tapped the envelope with his finger like it was a cheap party trick. I felt my face heat up. Walter didn't laugh. He just watched them with this strange calm, his hand still resting near the last envelope mine. "I thought we could skip the guessing this year," he said. "You can open them later, in private." That should have been the first clue. My parents exchanged a look I knew well. The silent, smug agreement that he'd lost it a little more. To them, anything that wasn't loud or flashy was a sign of weakness. I slid my envelope closer and ran my thumb along the edge. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. Dad waved his hand dismissively. We'll open them at home and call you when we figure out the joke. Greg, Walter said, his voice still mild, there is no joke. But they had already decided it was. When my parents make up their minds, the truth doesn't stand a chance. We left an hour later. Mom kissed Walter's cheek, telling him he looked so good for his age. Dad clapped him on the shoulder like he was closing a business deal. In the car, before we'd even reached the end of the driveway, Mom flipped her envelope open. She glanced inside, held the rectangle of paper up to the dim light from the dash, and laughed. "Oh my God," she said. "He really did it again. A check, he actually wrote checks. This is getting sad." Dad didn't bother opening his. "I'll look at it later. Banks are closed until Monday anyway." I didn't open mine at all. I just held it in my lap, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't heavy, but something about it felt serious, deliberate, like the kind of thing you don't rip open between snide comments and half-melted snow. Back in my apartment that night, the radiator clicking in the corner, I finally sat on the edge of my bed and opened the envelope. It wasn't a joke. It was a real check. My name printed clearly. The amount made my chest tighten, more money than I'd seen in one place in my entire life. I sat there, the city noise muted by the snow outside, staring at that slip of paper. I had no idea that by the time I decided what to do with it, that check wouldn't just change my bank balance. It would set my entire family on fire. I didn't sleep much that night. The check lay on my nightstand like an accusation. I must have stared at it a dozen times, convincing myself it wasn't real, then doubting myself again. Walter wasn't a man who joked about money, but my parents' voices echoed in my head loud enough to drown out my own judgment. By morning, I'd made up my mind. Not because I wanted the money, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to know the truth. I held my breath, opened my banking app, positioned the check under the camera, and deposited it. The moment I hit submit, a pit formed in my stomach. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long second, half expecting an alert to pop up saying something like suspected fraud. Nothing happened. The app simply returned to the home screen, my balance unchanged. Probably for the best, I told myself, sliding the phone aside. I made coffee. Fed the neighbor's cat I was babysitting for the week. Tried to sketch a bedroom layout for a client, but my pencil kept hesitating mid-stroke. Around noon, I met Sophie for lunch at a cafe down the street. She breezed in wearing a coat lined with faux fur, hair twisted in a lazy bun that somehow still looked perfect. "You look haunted," she said, sitting across from me. "Family Christmas? You have no idea." I told her everything, the envelopes, the comments, the check. She leaned forward. "Claire, you know your grandfather. He doesn't play mind games. If he wrote you a check, it's real." "That's the problem," I said. "I think he meant something by it." Sophie stirred her iced latte. "Maybe he just wanted to do something kind for you. You don't know my parents. They're going to spin this into something ugly," she shrugged. "Then don't give them the pen." I smiled at that. Sophie always had the kind of confidence I wished I could borrow. We walked back together after lunch, talking about projects and clients, anything but Christmas. For a few hours, I forgot about the envelope. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. My heartbeat sped up. "Hello, good afternoon," a polite voice said. "May I speak with Claire Morgan? This is she. I'm calling from Columbia Federal Bank. I wanted to inform you that the check you deposited this morning has officially cleared." The world seemed to snap quiet. I pressed my hand to the table to steady myself. "Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. Funds are fully available in your account." My breathing hitched. "Thank you," I managed, though the words barely came out. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at nothing. It felt surreal, like I'd pushed a domino without realizing the whole line was about to collapse. The collapse came 10 minutes later. My phone buzzed again. This time I recognized the name. Mom. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I answered. Her voice shot through the speaker like a sharp wire. "Claire, did you talk to your grandfather today?" "No," I said slowly. "Why, well," she snapped. "Your father and I just got off the phone with the bank, and apparently the checks he gave us were invalid." "Invalid how?" "They were stopped," she said. "Canceled, blocked, whatever the term is, but yours." A pause. A hiss of breath. "They said yours went through." I didn't say anything. Mom filled the silence with frantic disbelief. Did you ask him to do this? Did you tell him something? Did you play victim to get him on your side? The accusation stunned me. No, Mom, I deposited the check, that's all. Well, it's obvious he's playing favorites again. Her voice grew smaller, meaner. He's punishing us. Punishing you for what? I asked quietly. For living our lives, she snapped. For moving forward instead of clinging to his outdated ways. I closed my eyes. That wasn't it. That wasn't it at all. Dad called an hour later. His tone was colder. You should have told us you deposited it, he said. It was a gift, I replied. That's what you do with gifts. Don't get smart with me, he said sharply. Your grandfather is confused. He shouldn't be handling finances anymore, you know that. I stared at my kitchen wall, my jaw tight. Walter, confused. He was the sharpest person in our family by a mile. Daddy, he's not confused. He must be, Dad insisted. Otherwise, he wouldn't humiliate us like this. Humiliate, not hurt, not shock, not concern. To them, everything was about appearance. Later that afternoon, I took a walk around my block just to breathe. Snow clung to branches, the world muted and soft around me. But inside my chest, everything felt loud. My parents' anger, their confusion, the bank call, Walter's quiet eyes at dinner. It was all adding up to something huge, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. When my phone buzzed again, I tugged it out of my pocket, expecting Mom or Dad. But it wasn't either of them. It was Walter. Claire, he said, voice steady as always, I imagine your parents have spoken to you. Yes. Well, he said gently, I think it's time you all come back for a conversation. A conversation, I repeated. Yes, he said. Saturday. 7 o'clock. Don't worry about bringing anything but the truth. A chill ran down my spine, because my grandfather didn't call meetings. But when he did, someone's world was about to crack. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. All week, the tension in my chest twisted tighter each time my phone buzzed. Mom sent long paragraphs filled with excuses, explanations, and thinly veiled accusations. Dad sent shorter messages, cold, clipped, all business. They both wanted to control the narrative before facing Walter again. I ignored them. What was I supposed to say? Sorry, your entitlement bounced at the bank. By late afternoon, Seattle was dipped in a quiet winter haze. I dressed simply jeans, a dark sweater, nothing flashy. Walter never cared about clothes. He cared about behavior. Sophie stopped by as I tied my boots. You good? She asked, leaning against my counter. No, I admitted, but I don't want to hide from this. She nodded. Then walk in there like you've already survived the worst part. I hugged her goodbye and drove out toward Walter's house, the sky dimming into soft gray. Snow had started again, a slow, drifting kind that looked peaceful until you realized how it soaked into your bones. When I pulled into the long driveway, my parents' car was already there. Of course it was. They always had to arrive first, to look prepared, composed, untouchable. The porch light glowed warmly against the snow. For a second, I thought about staying in the car and pretending I never got his message. But Walter Reed didn't summon without purpose, and I owed him more than avoidance. I stepped out. The air was sharp, biting at my cheeks. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked up the steps. Before I could knock, the door opened. Walter stood there wearing his old cardigan, the faint smell of firewood clinging to him. His face was unreadable, not angry, not sad, just resolute. Claire, he said softly, come in. Inside, the house was warm. The fireplace crackled in the living room, casting golden light across the floor. But the atmosphere was thick enough to feel. My parents sat on the couch, Lillian stiff as a bored Greg with his arms crossed. Mom's mascara looked slightly smudged, which told me she'd either cried or rehearsed crying. Neither option surprised me. Hi, I said. Mom exhaled dramatically. Claire, thank God. Your grandfather has been impossible to reason with. Walter shut the door with a calmness that made her words sound ridiculous. Let's sit, he said. We followed him into the dining room. It wasn't set with dinner this time. No candles, no fancy plates. Just a long wooden table and a stack of folders placed neatly at one end. Greg eyed them uneasily. Dad, what is this? Walter didn't sit at the head of the table as usual. Instead, he sat in the middle, directly across from the three of us. "This," he said, sliding the folders forward, "is clarity." No one spoke. He rested his hands on the table. Steady, certain. "Before I say anything else," he continued, "I want to hear your side, both of you." My parents exchanged a look, then Mom jumped in. "Walter, the situation with the checks, it was embarrassing. The bank called us, saying ours were denied and Claire's was processed. We assumed something went wrong, or maybe you didn't realize what you gave us." Walter blinked slowly, his expression unreadable. Dad leaned forward. "If you're upset about something we said at dinner, that's not fair. We thought those envelopes were just for amusement, like your Christmas traditions. You know, the jokes, the games." Mom nodded rapidly. "Yes, exactly. We thought you were teasing. You can't expect us to treat everything so seriously." Walter let the silence stretch long enough for them to hear themselves. Then he turned to me. "Claire," I swallowed. "I didn't think it was a joke," I said quietly. "You gave it to us with intention, so I treated it with intention." My parents stiffened, as if my words were a betrayal. Walter nodded once. "That's exactly what I was waiting to hear." He reached for the top folder and opened it, revealing a printed bank statement. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is the record of the 3 checks I wrote." He slid one statement toward my father. "One for you." He slid the second to my mother. "One for you." Then he placed the final statement in front of me. "And one for Claire," Dad frowned. "We know what these are. Our checks bounced. Just tell us why." Walter folded his hands. "I stopped your checks because of how you treated the gift. Not because of the money, but because of the mockery." Mom's voice cracked. "Mockery, Walter, we were just laughing. Families laugh." "Families laugh with grace," he replied gently. "Not at those who give to them." The next words came like a blade wrapped in velvet. "I wanted to see who respected the gesture. Only one of you did." Greg's jaw clenched. "So that's it. You're judging us over one moment?" "One moment reveals a lifetime of habits," Walter said. He turned to me again. "Claire, you didn't rush to open it. You didn't assume the worst. You didn't treat it like theater. You saw me, not the envelope." My face warmed, embarrassed by the attention. But my parents looked stricken. Mom whispered, "Walter, what are you saying?" Walter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm saying that tonight I'm drawing a line." He reached into the folder, took out a single sealed document and placed it in front of him. The fire popped behind us, sending a spark into the air. My parents leaned forward in unison. "What line?" Dad demanded. Walter met his eyes, unwavering. "The line between those who only want my money and the one person who still wants me." My heart stopped. Because I knew, whatever was inside that document, it wasn't small. And it wasn't reversible. Dad's face flushed a heavy shade of red. "The one person who still wants you," he repeated, laughing sharply. "Dad, what does that even mean? We show up to every holiday. We check on you." You check on my wallet," Walter said, not unkindly, just firmly. Mom gasped, placing a hand on her chest. "That's unfair. You know we love you." Walter tilted his head slightly. "Love doesn't sound like ridicule. It doesn't look like eye-rolling, and it doesn't dismiss my gifts as games." Mom looked like he'd slapped her. Greg leaned back, trying a different tactic. The businessman tone, the negotiator voice. "Okay, fine, you're upset. Let's just clear the air. We didn't mean anything by it, but stopping our checks, that wasn't right either." Walter didn't blink. "It was intentional." Dad's jaw tightened until a vein pulsed at his temple. "So the only check you allowed through was hers." Dad gestured toward me with something between disbelief and resentment. "Why? She's not married. She's barely holding on with that little design hobby. It's a job," I cut in quietly. He ignored me like he always did. "And we've been here for you for decades. We built a life, a real one." Walter sighed, not bitter, just tired. "You built an image, Greg. Claire built a life." Silence, my heart hammered. I didn't want to be in the middle of this, but he placed me there anyway. Walter tapped the unopened document in front of him. "This isn't punishment," he said. "It's truth. Something this family has avoided for a very long time." Mom's eyes filled with tears, not the soft kind, but the defensive kind, fear wrapped in self-pity. "Walter, please," she whispered. "We were joking. We didn't think the envelopes were serious." "That was the test," he said gently. Not the money, the gesture, and how you both responded showed me everything I needed to know, Greg scoffed. Oh, come on, Dad. Claire didn't do anything special. She just didn't open it. That's the point, Walter said quietly. She treated it with respect before she even knew what it was worth. The word respect hung in the air, heavier than anything else. Mom shook her head. So what then? You're giving her more money, a bigger check. What are we talking about here, Walter? He opened the envelope in front of him and slid out a document wrapped with a silver paperclip. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it mattered. Walter unfolded the first page. For the past few years, he said carefully, I've been reevaluating how I want my affairs handled, my properties, my investments, the trust my parents left me, everything I worked for. Dad's eyes narrowed. What did you do? Walter turned the paper around so they could see the bold letters at the top. Amendment to Living Trust, primary beneficiary change. Mom's cry escaped her throat before she could stop it. Dad stood up so fast his chair scraped harshly against the floor. You did not do this. Walter looked up at him without fear. I did. Dad's voice cracked, furious and frightened all at once. You're cutting us out after everything we've done for you. You've done very little for me, Walter said calmly. You've done a great deal for appearances and for yourselves. Mom shook her head, tears streaking her foundation. You can't just give everything to her. She's not prepared. Walter raised one finger. She is more prepared than either of you. Not because she asked for anything, but because she didn't. A cold wave washed over me. Grandpa, I never wanted. I know you didn't, he said gently. That's why you're the only one who should have it. Dad was breathing like someone had punched the wind from him. This is insane, he muttered. Claire is manipulating you. She's been playing innocent. I flinched. Walter's voice cut clean through his accusations. She didn't even cash the check for the money. She cashed it because she trusted me enough to believe it was real. Mom looked at me with a mix of envy and disbelief. But she's not the responsible one. We've handled everything for years. That, Walter replied, is exactly the issue. He slid the document toward me. Claire, he said softly, this is for you to look over. Evan will walk you through it next week. My hand shook as I touched the paper, but I didn't lift it. I couldn't. Dad slammed his palm on the table. This isn't over. You're confused, Dad. You're making decisions you'll regret. Walter finally raised his voice, not loud, not violent, but strong enough to silence the room. I am not confused. I am clear for the first time in a long time. The fire crackled sharply behind us, like punctuation. Mom covered her mouth, crying harder. Greg paced beside the table like a man who'd been cornered. Walter watched them both with heartbreaking sadness. You lost nothing tonight except the illusion of entitlement, he said softly. You still have your jobs, your home, your savings. He pointed to the trust papers. What you've lost is the belief that you understood what family means. The words stunned all of us. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt shattered. Walter stood slowly. There's dinner in the oven, he said, if anyone can eat without resentment. No one moved. My parents stayed frozen, unable to accept what had just happened. I couldn't breathe. Because I knew, whatever happened after tonight, our family would never be the same. No one spoke for a long time after Walter left the room. The only sound came from the grandfather clock in the hallway, a slow, steady tick that seemed to grow louder with every passing second. My parents sat there, stunned, like they'd been pushed underwater and were still scrambling for air. Dad was the first to move. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of the dining room. This is absurd, he muttered. I'm not letting this happen. I'll get a lawyer. I'll prove he's not in the right state of mind. Mom sniffed hard, wiping her cheeks with shaking fingers. You think your father is manipulating him? She asked, her voice trembling. Because that's what this feels like. Claire, he never would have done this without someone putting ideas in his head. My stomach twisted. I didn't manipulate anyone, I said quietly. Dad froze. Slowly, he turned toward me. Oh, really? You didn't whisper to him about how we treat you. You didn't bring up your little apartment or your hard life. The words hit me harder than they should have. I didn't say anything, I repeated. He made the decision on his own. He's old, Dad snapped. He's lucid, I countered. Mom's voice cracked. Claire, please tell us you didn't encourage this. Something inside me finally snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood. Encourage what? I asked. Being treated with basic respect. You laughed in his face when he gave you a gift. You mocked him before you even knew what was inside the envelope. Mom looked away. Dad clenched his jaw. You think this is about the checks? I continued. It's about years of treating him like a retirement plan instead of a person. Dad slammed his fist against the table. Enough! But his anger didn't scare me anymore. It just sounded hollow. You're blaming me, I said quietly, because you can't face the fact that he finally saw the truth. Dad's face reddened further. Mom wiped another tear but didn't defend me. Of course she didn't. Walter re-entered the room just as the tension hit a breaking point. He carried a tray with 2 steaming bowls, simple chicken stew, no fancy plating, no pretense. The contrast against the heavy silence was staggering. He set one bowl in front of my seat and one in his, ignoring the icy atmosphere my parents had created. Claire, he said gently, sit. I hesitated, but then lowered myself back into the chair. He took the seat beside me at the middle of the table, an intentional choice. Not at the head, not above anyone, just present. Dad scoffed. So she gets dinner and we get what? Disinheritance and humiliation. Walter rested one hand on the table. You are welcome to stay and eat, he said, if you can sit without resentment. Mom let out a sharp, wounded sound. Resentment. Walter, you just rewrote your entire legacy and gave it to a girl who still buys furniture off Craigslist. I almost laughed, but the bitterness in her tone stopped me. Walter stayed calm. Lillian, I didn't rewrite anything. I clarified it. Dad pointed at the trust documents. No, you cut us out. Walter turned toward them with heartbreaking steadiness. I gave Claire control because she has never treated me as a means to an end. She has never assumed she deserves anything I've earned, and she has never confused appearance with character. Mom shrank into her chair, her composure melting like ice under heat. Dad's voice dropped into a low growl. You're rewarding her for doing nothing. Walter shook his head. She did everything. She listened. She treated the envelope like a gesture, not a transaction. She waited until she got home to open it. She thanked me without expectation. He paused. And most importantly, she didn't laugh. The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents exchanged a broken, bitter glance, united not in love, but in disbelief that they weren't the center of Walter's world anymore. Mom grabbed her purse abruptly. Let's go, she whispered to Dad. I can't stay here. Dad nodded stiffly. This isn't over, he said, pointing at Walter. We'll talk again, you'll come to your senses. Walter simply folded his hands. I'm already in my senses. My parents stormed out, the front door slamming behind them. The house suddenly felt twice as quiet. I stared at the table, guilt and relief crashing against each other like opposing waves. Walter pushed the bowl of stew a little closer to me. Eat, he said softly. You haven't had a real meal since yesterday. I looked at him, my throat tight. Grandpa, I don't want your money. I know, he replied. That's exactly why you deserve to protect it. Protect, not own, not enjoy, not spend. Protect. It was the first time the weight of what he'd done fully settled on my shoulders. What if they never forgive me? I asked quietly. He gave me a sad, knowing smile. Claire, some people don't forgive because they were hurt. They refuse to forgive because they lost control. I swallowed hard. And us, I whispered. He placed a hand over mine. We haven't lost anything. His voice wavered just slightly. We've finally gained truth. The fire crackled behind us, warm and steady. And yet the night wasn't done with me, because the next day, Dad showed up at my apartment, and he wasn't alone. The knock came early, too early for a Sunday. I was still in pajamas, hair tied in a messy knot, a mug of coffee halfway to my lips when the pounding shook my apartment door again. Claire, open up, my father's voice. Dread slid down my spine. I set the mug down slowly and walked to the door. When I opened it, Dad shoved his way inside without waiting for an invitation. Mom followed, wrapped in a designer coat, eyes puffy from crying but still scanning my apartment like it offended her. They weren't alone. A third person stepped in behind them, someone I didn't recognize at first. a tall man in a dark overcoat holding a slim briefcase. Mom gestured toward him with a shaky hand. "This is Mitchell Green," she said. "Your father's attorney." My stomach dropped. "An attorney?" I asked. "Here." Dad pointed at me like I was a suspect in an interrogation. "We need to talk about what you've done." "What I've done?" I repeated, stunned. "I haven't done anything." Mitchell cleared his throat. "We're hoping to resolve things peacefully. Your parents have concerns regarding your grandfather's state of mind." Ah, there it was. "Let me guess," I said. "You want him declared incompetent." Dad didn't even flinch. "If that's what it takes to stop this madness." "It's not madness," I said sharply. "He knows exactly what he's doing." Mom stepped in close, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Claire, sweetheart, you don't understand the pressure he's under. He's old. He's alone. People get confused at that age." "He's not confused," I snapped. Dad's jaw clenched. "We're worried you've influenced him." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You think I can influence Walter Reed?" Mitchell raised a hand diplomatically. "We're not accusing anyone. We just want to ensure the trust changes were made with full mental capacity and without external pressure." I stared at them, these two people who raised me, who were now standing in my living room plotting legal warfare against a man who had done nothing but love us. "How far are you willing to go?" I asked softly. Dad didn't hesitate. "As far as we have to." A coldness settled inside me. "Get out," I said. Mom blinked. "Claire, get out." They looked stunned, as if I had no right to refuse them entry into my own life. Dad stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You think this ends with a signature on a trust document? It doesn't. We will contest. We will challenge. We will not be cut out by a girl who lives above a bakery." My chest tightened. "That's exactly why you're losing this," I whispered. "Because you think love is something you earn by boasting or showing up early or dressing nicely. But respect isn't earned with performance." Before I could say more, another knock came at the door. A gentler one. I knew who it was before I even reached for the handle. Walter stood in the hallway, wearing his old wool coat, breath visible in the cold morning air. His eyes moved past me to my parents and the attorney. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. "Greg," Lillian. "Mitchell," Dad stiffened. "Dad, this isn't safe. You shouldn't be walking around alone." Walter raised an eyebrow. "I've been walking around alone longer than you've been alive." Mitchell cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, we're here to discuss the trust amendment." Walter nodded. "Yes, and I'm here to end the discussion." Mom stepped forward, desperate. "Walter, please, don't do this. Don't let her turn you against us." Walter didn't even look at her when he spoke. "No one turned me," he said calmly. "I simply opened my eyes." Dad's voice broke. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." Walter's reply was quiet, but it hit like thunder. "The biggest mistake of my life was believing you valued me more than my money." Silence filled the room, heavy, crushing. Walter turned to Mitchell. "You may file whatever challenge you wish," he said. "I've already completed multiple evaluations confirming my mental clarity. Claire had no involvement. Every document was reviewed, every signature witnessed." Mitchell swallowed hard. "Sir, then there is nothing more I can advise them." He packed up his briefcase slowly, bowed his head, and left. My parents stared at Walter as if he'd betrayed them. He looked at them with something far more painful than anger, disappointment. "You didn't lose my estate tonight," he said. "You lost my trust." Mom's tears returned, this time raw, not performative. "Walter, you can't just erase us." "I'm not erasing you," he said gently. "I'm stepping back from the illusion that we're a family that listens." Dad shook his head, defeated. "Then what do you want from us?" Walter met his gaze evenly. "A thank you, a sincere one day when you're ready." He turned toward me. "Claire," he asked. I stepped closer to him, feeling something loosen in my chest. "Yes, would you walk me downstairs?" I nodded and followed him out. He moved slowly down the staircase, gripping the railing with one hand. When we reached the sidewalk, he let out a long breath, white fog swirling around him. "I'm sorry they came like that," I said quietly. He shook his head. "No, truth reveals character. Better to see it now than later." I swallowed hard. "What happens next?" He squeezed my hand gently. "Next," he said, "you live your life without shrinking." I blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. Grandpa, why me? His answer was simple. Because you were the only one who treated the gift like it meant something. He stepped back, giving me a warm, tired smile. Money changes hands every day, he said softly. But respect is given once. As he walked away, snow drifted down over the quiet street. For the first time in years, I felt something inside me settle. I hadn't won anything. I'd simply stopped pretending.